Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I'm about as white as they come, Scottish descent, pale as a ghost, the kind of guy who burns in moonlight. My wife and kids are Mexican, which makes for some interesting family dynamics. Over the years, I've learned that sometimes my whiteness can be useful, especially when dealing with situations where police get called over nothing. My son recently married this amazing woman from Guatemala. She's smart, funny, and speaks perfect English, but like most couples, they talk to each other in Spanish a lot. It's natural for them. When his new father-in-law, I've been trying to learn more Spanish myself, though I'm pretty terrible at it. The whole situation started because my daughter-in-law is pregnant and has a serious coffee addiction. This woman needs caffeine running through her veins to function. So there we were, sitting in one of those chain coffee shops in the mall, just having a normal conversation in Spanish. She was teaching me some phrases, and I was butchering the pronunciation like usual. We were minding our own business when this woman walks by our table. She looked like the type who demands to speak to managers for sport, you know the kind. But instead of just walking past like a normal person, she stops dead in her tracks and stares at us. Now here's where it gets interesting. You can always tell the difference between someone who's just ignorant and someone who's actually racist by what they do next. This lady walked right past me, the obvious white guy, and went straight for my pregnant daughter-in-law. Karen walked over and started yelling about how this was America and we needed to speak English here. My daughter-in-law looked up confused at first since she speaks perfect English, probably better than half the people in that mall. She asked what the problem was, but Karen wasn't done. She got louder, bending down right in my daughter-in-law's face and screaming about speaking English or going back where she came from. She called her one of those people who were destroying the country. The whole coffee shop went quiet. People were staring, but nobody was moving to help. That's when I remembered something important about Latino women. They don't back down from fights. Without saying a word, my daughter-in-law stood up and slapped those expensive sunglasses right off Karen's face. Then she sat back down like nothing happened. The glasses went flying across the floor. That's when Karen lost it completely. She started screaming like someone had set her on fire, claiming she'd been attacked by a terrorist for no reason. She was rolling around on the floor yelling for someone to call the police and the army. It was the most dramatic performance I've ever seen. And that's saying something because I've watched my fair share of soap operas. That's when Karen's husband came running over. He was maybe 5'8", skinny as a rail, and looked like he'd never been in a fight in his life. But he was puffed up and ready to get in my daughter-in-law's face. Big mistake. I stood up. Now, I should mention that I'm over 6 feet tall, weigh north of 300 pounds, and spend my free time lifting heavy things. I've got a beard down to my chest and arms like tree trunks. Each of my thighs is bigger than my daughter-in-law's waist. The husband took one look at me and went white as a sheet. I told him to think very carefully about his next move because any part of him that touched her, I was going to break off and shove down his throat. Then I told him to take his wife and get out of there. They practically ran to the other side of the coffee shop and huddled in a corner booth. Of course, someone had already called the police. They showed up about 10 minutes later, and Karen immediately launched into her victim story. She told the officers she was just minding her own business when this crazy terrorist attacked her. She claimed I had threatened to kill her husband and pointed to her face, saying her nose might be broken. She demanded we both be arrested immediately. The first cop was nodding along, taking notes, but then the second officer came over to our table and asked my daughter-in-law to explain what happened. My daughter-in-law put her hand on her belly and started crying. She told the officer she was just sitting there having coffee when that woman started screaming at her. She said she was scared for her baby, so she defended herself. That's when I decided to use my secret weapon, being an articulate white guy who knows his rights. I told the officer I was sure this place had security cameras and that there were at least a dozen witnesses who saw that woman's unprovoked attack on my pregnant daughter-in-law. I made it clear that she wouldn't be answering any more questions without her attorney present. The cops spent about 20 minutes talking to witnesses and reviewing the security footage. When they came back, they had a very different attitude. The officer explained that while they didn't recommend slapping people, it was clear from the video that my daughter-in-law was acting in self-defense after being verbally assaulted. They said they'd file a report, but nobody was getting arrested that day. Karen started screaming again, ranting about how this was ridiculous and claiming my daughter-in-law was an illegal immigrant. She demanded they check her papers and complained about discrimination against real Americans. The officer told her they'd reviewed the footage, and she was the one who started the confrontation by shouting racial slurs at people having a private conversation. He said if anyone should be worried about charges, it was her for harassment and disturbing the peace. The officer turned back to us and said we were free to go. He apologized for the trouble. When we were leaving, I heard Karen still ranting to anyone who would listen about how the system was rigged against real Americans. Her husband was trying to drag her toward the exit, looking like he wanted to disappear into the floor. My daughter-in-law linked her arm through mine when we walked out. She thanked me for having her back, and I told her that's what family does. We stopped at another coffee shop on the way home. This time, nobody bothered us about speaking Spanish. Funny how that works. I met my ex back in 1990 in Florida. I was 20, she was 19. She was working as a waitress at this local diner. One day, after her shift, she needed a ride to go feed her horses, so I offered to drive her. We hit it off, and within a month, she moved into my Hollywood apartment. Things were good for a while, but by 1992, she had blown through all our savings on horse stuff. Then she got fired from the diner for not showing up 3 days straight while she was pregnant. Our daughter was born in August of 1992. I was working 7 days a week at 3 different job sites just to keep us afloat, barely seeing my family. After some workplace accidents, I quit my jobs and took a hard look at our finances. We were broke. Turns out while I was working my butt off, she hadn't been paying rent for 3 months. Instead, she was taking that money to some psychic. We had to move in with her parents. Her dad made her sell the horses and equipment. She had spent $30,000 in 2 years, and we only got $8,000 back, which she kept when we broke up. When our daughter was born, we didn't have health insurance. Her mom suggested she register as a single parent to get benefits. Big mistake on my part for going along with that. Her dad got transferred to Virginia Beach since he was in the Navy. Her mom and she moved up first. A week later, I get a call where she tells me she wants to break up. I still moved up anyway to be close to my daughter and ended up staying with her brother, who became my best friend. I had my daughter every weekend and gave my ex $125 a week for support. This was back when I was only making $225 a week. Her dad kept claiming to people that I never gave her money, but her brother always backed me up. Everything changed when her mom was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and died 4 months later. 2 weeks after the funeral, my ex packed up and moved to North Carolina with some welder she barely knew. Her dad came back from spreading his wife's ashes to find an empty house. I married my current wife in '96. She's been incredibly supportive through all this mess. My ex didn't contact me until 1997, when she called demanding $1,800 just to talk to my daughter. I paid it, got less than 5 minutes on the phone before she took it away, and told me I'd have to pay more for additional time. When she kept calling, asking for money, I suggested we go to court. She'd hang up every time. I hired a private investigator, found out she was in Tampa, and drove down there in 1998. The family court judge literally laughed me out of court, telling me I had no family claim. Fast forward to 2006. My daughter was 13 and in serious trouble at school. Her grandfather called me, explaining that she was about to repeat 5th grade. Since my wife is a teacher, he thought it would be best if she stayed with us. My wife agreed to help. What followed was a nightmare. My daughter stole from teachers, removed a safety bar from a bunk bed that caused her sister to break her arm, kept her younger sisters awake until midnight, telling them horror stories, and physically hurt them if they didn't listen. The final straw came when she was 14. She got a gun from some local boy and brought it home. She actually started shooting at my 6-year-old daughter. Thank God the gun jammed, and our babysitter tackled her. Police came and took her to jail, then a mental hospital, where my ex had to pick her up. My ex ended up filing for child support and got $250 a month. The judge told her she could only get 20% of my income. Things got worse from there. At 14, my daughter was charged with breaking and entering, grand theft auto, and more. At 15, she was caught with a 55-year-old man. My ex tried to blackmail him, but ended up getting him arrested instead. At 16, she beat up a disabled kid in a wheelchair. At 17, drug charges. When she turned 18, we made a family cookbook and sent her a copy. She responded with a picture of it burning, telling us in an email that she didn't care about family and that I was just a bank account to her. Every time she got in trouble, she'd end up in a mental hospital, and my ex would call begging for bail money. I always declined but made sure she had proper help and coverage, which made them even angrier. By 21, she finally finished high school. By 24, she had 2 kids who ended up in foster care. When I tried to get custody of my grandchildren, my ex attempted to kidnap them, and the state blocked any family from having custody. Recently, I quit my job, left the area, and semi-retired. My ex's dad heard about this and told her, making it sound like I was loaded. He suggested she make sure our daughter was in my will. That's how I ended up getting served court papers last month. My ex filed a lawsuit demanding to see my will and have our daughter added if she wasn't already in it. Court day arrives. I'm there with my attorney Joe, and my ex shows up alone representing herself. The judge is this older woman who clearly doesn't suffer fools. The judge asked my ex what we had there today, explaining that the way this was filed didn't give them much to go by. She wanted to know if I owed back child support. My ex told her no, that child support had stopped 10 years ago. She explained that she wanted to make sure that our daughter was well taken care of after I died. The judge corrected her about how to address the court properly, then asked how she planned on making sure our daughter was taken care of. My ex demanded that my will be read, and if our daughter wasn't in it, then the judge needed to make sure she was added to it. The judge rolled her eyes a little and told me she saw I had hired Joe as my attorney. I confirmed that I had. She said that was fantastic and asked Joe if he had the document in question. Joe explained that I had spoken to the plaintiff's brother and found out that this document might be at the center of the issue. He told the judge we also had the attorney who drafted the document ready to be on video chat and handed over the document. The judge said they would take a recess while she investigated this a little bit. She asked my ex for our daughter's full name and social security number before she left, explaining she needed all the information. My ex gave her the information and the judge left. My ex had this evil, smug grin on her face looking at me like she'd already won. 4 hours later, we get called back. My ex is still grinning ear to ear. The judge asked my ex what our daughter's current address was. She mentioned that she'd had her clerk and the sheriff investigate this during recess. My ex looked down at the floor and quietly said, "Louisiana State Jail." The judge then asked where she was going to be next. My ex reluctantly answered Alabama Federal Jail. Turns out my daughter had been running drugs across state lines, got into a chase in a stolen car, then decided to shoot at state and federal agents, injuring 3 of them. She got 20 years in Louisiana and life in Alabama. The judge told my ex she had brought a frivolous case in front of the court. She made it clear that my ex was not entitled to see the document. Since I was still alive and kicking, she explained that she hadn't even read the document. My ex asked if she could at least tell her how much our daughter was getting. The judge told her that not only would she not tell her, but that my ex now had to pay court costs and my attorney fees. My ex then asked what court she needed to file in to do this. The judge told her she could try all the way up to the Supreme Court, and they would still deny her. She banged her gavel and dismissed court. The total payment she's on the hook for is $5,000, since the attorney who drafted my will was also collecting a fee. After 30 years of being put through hell by this woman and her daughter, watching my wife support me through complete breakdowns from this turmoil, I'll be damned if either of them gets a single thing from our estate. I would leave something to my grandchildren, but I don't even have their names or know where they are. For about 2 years now, I've been working at this big international company. Started right after high school, when I couldn't afford university straight away. Moving stock, cleaning, helping customers, and so on. The problem was our warehouse manager. This woman was a complete nightmare to work for. She barely showed up maybe once or twice a week, and when she did, she spent most of her time in the office doing who knows what. But the real kicker was when her son turned 18 last year. She hired him full-time immediately and gave him whatever schedule he wanted. Nice nepotism, right? When she was around, her son would act all meek and hardworking. But the second she left, he turned into a complete tyrant. He'd bark orders at people who had been working there longer than he'd been alive. He'd sit around doing nothing while the rest of us busted our backs. And if anyone complained, well, good luck. His mommy was the boss. Most of my co-workers hated the guy, but I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was just young and didn't know better. So last month, I woke up feeling absolutely terrible. My stomach was churning, my head was pounding, and I could barely stand up straight. I dragged myself to work anyway because I needed the money. But by afternoon, I knew I wasn't going to make it through another shift like this. I found the manager's son restocking shelves and told him straight up that I felt really sick. I explained that if I was still this bad tomorrow, I wouldn't be coming in and would call his mom to let her know. He seemed understanding and told me not to leave him hanging if I was actually fine. I thought that was reasonable. I finished my shift, even helped him lock up the store. We were walking to the parking lot when he started making conversation and asked if I smoked weed. I was surprised he asked, but I figured he was just trying to be friendly. I told him, yeah, I was planning to smoke some when I got home that night since it might help with how crappy I felt. He got excited and said he smoked too sometimes because it helped him relax after dealing with all the stress at work. We chatted a bit more about random stuff and I actually thought maybe I'd misjudged him. Maybe he wasn't such a bad guy after all. The next morning I felt even worse, so I called in sick like I'd said I would. I spent the whole day in bed, barely able to keep food down. When I came back to work 2 days later, I immediately knew something was wrong. My co-workers were giving me weird looks, and there was this tension in the air whenever I walked by. Finally, one of the guys I was friendly with pulled me aside and asked what I'd done. He said the manager had been looking for me yesterday, and she was not happy. Before I could ask what he meant, the manager herself appeared and ordered me to her office immediately. I followed her to the back, my stomach sinking. She started yelling at me about how she heard I couldn't be bothered to work the other day. She said her son told her I was planning to lie about being sick just to get a day off. My jaw dropped. I tried to explain that wasn't what happened at all, that I was genuinely sick and had told him I might not make it in if I was still feeling bad. But she called me a liar and said her son told her I admitted I was just going to call in with some fake excuse. She went on for 10 more minutes about responsibility and work ethic while I stood there in shock. I had no idea the manager's son had completely twisted what I'd said, but it got worse. Later that day, I was called for a random locker search. 2 security guards went through my bag with a fine-tooth comb. They told me they were looking for something specific and asked to check every pocket. They were clearly searching for drugs. They didn't even want to see the receipt for the items I bought in the store earlier. I realized the manager's son must have told his mom about our conversation about smoking weed too. By the end of that day, word had spread around the entire store that I was some kind of liar who faked sick days. The manager's son had been telling everyone who would listen. I was furious, but I'm not stupid. I knew I couldn't go up against the manager directly, she'd just fire me. But her son? He'd given me some interesting information during our chat. The next day, I approached him during our break. I casually mentioned that I remembered when he said he smoked sometimes, and wondered if he might be interested in something a bit stronger. When he asked what I meant, I told him I might know someone who could get cocaine. I reminded him that he'd mentioned he used that sometimes too, right? His eyes lit up and he said he was definitely interested. I then hinted that my guy might be able to bring quite a lot to work tomorrow, maybe half a kilogram worth. He got super excited and said that was way more than he usually got. I made sure to have this conversation where other people could overhear, and I was pretty sure he'd run straight to mommy with this information too. Sure enough, the next morning I got a call to meet the manager in the locker room before my shift started. When I walked in, it was unreal what I saw. There were 3 private security officers following me from the staff room. Inside the locker room, 8 more security personnel were waiting, along with a drug-sniffing dog. The manager and her son were standing there with these smug looks on their faces. Even the regional manager had shown up for this circus. The manager ordered me to open my locker and empty my bag immediately. I complied, pulling out my work clothes, my lunch, and a few store receipts. The dog sniffed everything thoroughly. The security team went through every pocket, every corner, every possible hiding spot. Nothing, because there was nothing to find. The silence in that room was deafening. The manager's face went from smug to confused to absolutely mortified when it dawned on everyone what had just happened. The regional manager was furious. He demanded to know if anyone had any idea how much this search cost the company. He said they'd pulled in a dozen officers and a K-9 unit and wanted to know what information this was all based on. The manager stammered that her son said he had reliable information that drugs were being brought onto company property. The regional manager asked where exactly this reliable information was now. The manager's son looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. The regional manager was not happy about the wasted resources, the unnecessary drama, or the fact that they'd essentially conducted the harassment search based on office gossip. Within a week, everything came crashing down for both of them. The manager got demoted and transferred to a different location. Her son got fired for providing false information that led to the expensive wild goose chase. But the story doesn't end there. A few days after he got fired, I was coming into work for what I knew would be one of my last shifts. I'd finally saved enough money to start university and had already given my notice. I was in the staff room changing into my uniform when I noticed the manager's son waiting for me in the staff area. I didn't think much of it and just got changed as usual. The security guard was just starting his shift too and happened to be nearby. When I was walking away from my locker, the manager's son suddenly appeared behind me. Without warning, he punched me in the back of the head. It was a complete cheap shot, while I was walking away and not even looking at him. But here's the thing, it was all caught on the security cameras. Plus, the security guard witnessed the whole thing and immediately called for backup. The guy got arrested on the spot for assault. The security footage showed everything clearly, and with a witness backing up the story, he ended up getting 7 months in prison. The company felt so bad about the whole situation that they gave me a nice bonus in my last paycheck as an apology for all the harassment I'd endured. His mom ended up having to find a new job after the whole mess became too much of an embarrassment for the company to keep her around, even in her demoted position. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.